Paranormal Activity 2 centers on a happy family with a young boy as they enjoy their lives in a normal neighborhood. However, things take an unsettling turn as strange things start happening in the house. Loud thuds, lights turning off, pots and pans moving on their own, among other things. But this is nothing compared to the torment they will soon face. Ah yes, Paranormal Activity 2. Ever since whispers of a sequel to 2009's Paranormal Activity have surfaced, I've had a terrible feeling about this whole thing. The first movie was fantastic. It combined true scares with serious suspense, taking hold of the fears most people have of the dark and the subtle sounds you hear at night and absolutely running with it. It all combined to make one of the best horror movies in the past decade. Ultimately, though, it did not need a sequel. Seriously, Hollywood, just because something's successful and makes a lot of money doesn't mean you need to keep milking that cash cow until whatever was originally awesome sucks. I'm looking at you, Saw, and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. God damn you, Hollywood. Anyway, despite my bad feelings about Paranormal Activity 2, I kept a close eye on its development. I wanted it to be good, but had no idea how they could pull off a sequel that didn't mess up the first one's ending. So, was I right, you're wondering? Did it suck as much as I feared it would? I'm not surprised to say no, actually. Even though I went into it with a really pessimistic view, I ended up liking Paranormal Activity 2, even if I have quite a few complaints about it. The first thing I want to go into is the time span of the movie and how it all fits into Paranormal Activity 1. This movie is a sort of prequel and sequel to the first one. At first it takes place about 2 months before Paranormal Activity 1, but at the end of the movie we're 3 days after the ending of the first one. Needless to say, because we're told this explicitly, it links into Paranormal Activity 1. This is also obvious through the fact that the entire movie covers the lives of the family of Katie's, the main girl in the first movie, sister, Christy. We even see Katie and Mika throughout Paranormal Activity 2, though they don't have huge roles. It's mostly just letting you know that yes, they are in fact there, and they do have something to do with the plot of this movie in particular. How exactly they tie into the relevant plot isn't revealed for a while, but for how hard it was to work off of Paranormal Activity 1's storyline, they did it very well in this case, so kudos to the writers for that. Anyway, while I did like the time span of the movie, I have to bring up something that stuck out to me as thoroughly confusing. Okay, so we have the young boy in the movie, Hunter, who in the first few scenes is introduced as a newborn baby. This is night 1. We get to night 2 and he has a full head of hair? Okay, what just happened? 1 day has supposedly progressed. 1 day. In the span of a day, he's learned how to walk, and he now has a full head of hair. In the span of a day. This to this. What gives? Did the day progress? 2 years? I mean, I know they grow up fast, but isn't this stretching it a bit? If 2 years or so really did pass, which I have to believe is the case, they really need to be more clear about this kind of stuff. No one likes to be confused, movie. No one. Don't make me pull out my favorite ELO song. Moving on, while the cast of characters in Paranormal Activity 2 can't really be considered big by general movie standards, it was definitely larger than the amount of people in the first movie, which worked very well for this. They were all likable too, which was a plus. Well, everyone except for the dad, that is. He was generally unlikable, especially near the end, where he's instrumental in something pretty bad that happens to 2 certain people, but I have to admit that he did have his funny moments. There wasn't really one obvious main character. This position was filled by both the mother/wife and the daughter, even if the latter seemingly disappears at the end of the movie. This is explained later on, but only after the movie is over, with an "oh, by the way, the daughter was here" afterthought. And, of course, the inclusion of Katie and Mika from Paranormal Activity 1 were welcome, and we find out why exactly these two were tormented by the demon in the first movie. However, this was one of the main things I disliked about Paranormal Activity 2, if not the biggest thing. There was absolutely no reason to go into the origins of the demon. I don't mean why specifically it attaches itself to Katie in Paranormal Activity 1. That twist I actually liked. I mean the details about how it hangs around the family in general. Leave that information to the viewer's imagination. Don't get rid of the mystery completely. I hate it when sequels do this. You have a perfect plot line for one movie, but then the second one has to come around and they have to ruin the plot of the first one with some dumbass retcon. Never mind. Let's move on to how scary Paranormal Activity 2 actually was compared to its predecessor. It definitely did have a few really good scares in it. The dragging always gets me, and a certain scene with the dog as well, which is more than I was expecting going into it. They were also more frequent than the scares in Paranormal Activity 1, but they didn't stay with me quite as much as the scares in the first movie did. In this case, I suppose it's quality, Paranormal Activity 1, versus quantity, Paranormal Activity 2 type thing. They did keep the element of extreme suspense though, so that was very nice. And unlike Paranormal Activity 1, a good amount of the scares were during the day, which added a huge element of surprise in some cases. Of course, this also takes away from some of the point of the series. What happens when you sleep at night, huh? I guess the fact that at least half of the scares in Paranormal Activity 2 happen during the day makes the new tagline for the series, what happens at random times during a 24-hour period. I do think they should have left us with a really good scare at the end, similar to what they did with Paranormal Activity 1's ending. This didn't give us that one last huge impression that stuck with us, because it wasn't really that scary at all. Despite that, I did actually like this ending. It was creepy and fitting for the story presented to us. And seeing people's reactions to it in the theater, and believe me, I was having the same sort of reactions as everyone else, was a blast. There were at least 2 instances at the end where everyone screamed out, "Oh no, oh god!" This wasn't because it was particularly frightening, but much more in the badass demon type category. There was another possession in Paranormal Activity 2, similar to that of Katie's possession in Paranormal Activity 1, but this case was fleshed out a bit more than in the first one, or at the very least, we see much more of it than in Paranormal Activity 1. This was enjoyable. There were some relatively scary parts concerning this, but there was one thing that made this very confusing. Now, I'm gonna go into a few spoilers, so if you don't want to hear any details about the plot, even if they're kinda minor and you can probably figure it out anyway from some of the trailers, go ahead and skip forward a little bit. Okay, so anyway, without going into a huge amount of detail, we find out that the demon wants Hunter, the son, after the other person in the house is taken control of. Going into who it is specifically is unnecessary. Why didn't the demon just take the kid after that? It had multiple chances to do so, and I'm not buying the excuse of they wanted to stick around and mess with the family. No. This particular demon may be a bit sadistic, but not to the point of it possibly losing what it wants. I just didn't understand that whole thing at all. Also, I know this is a bit random, but what happened to scenes in the trailers like this and this? I was waiting the entire movie to see these, and they were completely absent. If those were put into the trailers just to make people curious, then that's really annoying, because I've seen a few people wondering just what the heck happened with that. If you're not going to put scenes into a movie that are major points in your trailer, leave them out of the stupid trailer in the first place. Okay, spoilers over. Anyway, as I've mentioned before, Paranormal Activity 2 is very connected with Paranormal Activity 1. The two movies can be independent of each other, yes, but if you see the sequel without seeing the first one, you're really missing a lot of what's going on, especially near the end. I'd even go as far to say that you'd be totally confused at the ending, so I wouldn't advise skipping the first one before seeing this. If you don't like Paranormal Activity 1, however, there's a good chance you won't like this movie. It's a very similar movie in style and story. This actually felt much more like it was being filmed with a true camcorder than the first one even, so the chances of disliking the first one but liking this one are probably pretty low. On the other hand, if you love Paranormal Activity 1 as much as I do, you may dislike this movie simply because of the stupid retcons to the first movie's story. I did like Paranormal Activity 2, I really did. The scares were genuine and the suspense was just as good as in the first one. I like Paranormal Activity 1 better, though. Still, though, despite this, I do like this movie, and I would recommend seeing it if you like the first one. No matter how critical I may sound of it, Paranormal Activity 2 is totally worth watching, and I will undoubtedly add it to my DVD collection when it comes out.